every night before our meetings, these great ideas come into my mind and the old witches show up in my dreams. And I just love that connection to the ancient past. I would say old witches, like ancient past witches. But so I'm thinking today about the development in the coven. You come in, you have your initiation, you learn your first steps, you memorize your lines, you get your gestures right, and hopefully you've had some really good sessions of hermetic philosophy lectures, and you're given assignments. You're given things to meditate on. You're given things to research and write about. You're given a magic to perform in the group. Something we want you to get in the middle. We want you to do something. Well, you can't just stand on the sidelines. You have to start participating. So I feel like there's those assignments given out. And then there's the wheel of the year, and you're working through the Sabbats, and you're recognizing the patterns, and you're making deeper connections with the God forms, and you're getting into this rhythm of the Earth's energy and solar system energy and the flow, and then you're doing better with your magic. And then, maybe depending on how many years you've been doing it, like I said, for me, it was 5 years as a first degree before I got my second and third, and that was right for me because I wanted a lot of practice and I wanted a lot of security mentally. Like, I really wanted to get it right and really know it. Like you said, you had to be the best. I didn't feel like I had to be the best, but I really wanted to be accurate with my basic work for sure. And we had a little bit of a checklist. I was going through the things, and there's so many things to learn and do. And then there's a place where you have to jump off the cliff into the second and third, and you walk into an amazingly much larger space than you thought was there.
It's true. I thought about this and you were talking about, oh, you're describing it very structurally. Oh, you now have you memorized everything and now you know the tools and you know all of the things that you need to do with them and you've learned all of the levels that you need to level, you know, in and you had your hermetics down, you now have the inner work down as well. So there's a whole lot of things that you do, which is logistic in the first degree. And then you begin to mature to the way that you're talking about you need to partake on the magic and you need to have some involvement in the magic of the circle. For me is very, and this is always what happened, for me is always very spontaneous. And the reason why it's because something will happen that will take the student into this active mode. And someone will need a healing or somebody will, and it's just happened that. And then because what I believe, and I was taught like this by Maxine, was that you don't really have to know everything. Some Alexandrians actually think that give me every single secret there is. Like if it was a zip file that you unzip and then suddenly all of these things come out of it. It isn't like that. Some things are taught when they have to be taught. They don't out of the experience comes the opportunity to actually exercise that. And I talked about this in other podcasts where I gave the example of the setting forth right, for instance, which is very interesting. And I've learned it when actually something happened and not before. So for me, learning is very spontaneous. Things happen, some good things and some not so good things. And then that will come and prompt the teaching, which is great to do like that because it's out of experience, out of necessity, and out of a really, really very deep desire to work the magic. And I think that's the secret ingredient. It's this really deep need of resolving, of actually manifesting, of putting out that particular desire and that particular outcome. This is the will at its finest. This is the will at its strongest. And this is, I think, what really lacks to many when they say, well, it didn't work. Well, did you really need it? Because if you do need it, then you will put that effort on. You will want that to happen. So I think that's where I come from, that navigating this current of necessity and really putting your will, strong will in the forefront of all of this. And of course, yes. So now the first degree is preparing for that moment of jumping into the abyss of the unknown, which is the second and third. What was your experience at that period? And when you were exactly at that particular time where you ask for the second and thirds, and then you realize that it was accepted, and then now you're gonna jump.
Well, in my coven, my training coven that I was in, which I appreciate that it was a training coven, there were a lot of after you asked for the second and third, it wasn't immediately said by the high priesthood yes or no. There was a period, a kind of a probation period of thinking about it. But then you had to do some really big things. You had to exhibit skill practically. And I do think you're absolutely right about that. You can hear a lecture, but you don't really understand it well until you do the thing with your hands or, get in the rhythm with your community because things would come to us all the time. A lot of illnesses, an emergency, an accident, somebody's child is run away. These are the things that come to the door like immediately, and the coven has to pull together and get this stuff done. It's really hands-on. And that's when you really begin to feel the power, feel your will, direct it, raise it properly, understand the mechanics that are necessary for a specific working, the timing of that, get all those components together and execute the magic, energetically for real. And then you've got to know, did it work or not? Because we're going to hear back from the people, which we always did. I'm going to give us probably in the 90% success rate when we really were together, concentrating and working things. So you have to be able to perform things like that. In my training coven, we had to do a test circle, which meant you were in charge of all preparation, designing the entire ritual, deciding who's doing what parts, and it needed to be really spectacular. It needed to be that it showed in layers that you had the grounded basic ritual down pat, but that you also understood the philosophy of the gods and the wheel, the year, enough to design a more intricate ritual for the people and the time of year or whatever your some people might do something more Egyptian or something maybe, focusing more on goddess, divine feminine. I mean, there was a range of things you could do, of course. So that was probably the more intimidating thing, and you don't know when it's coming. You're told, "Oh, well, in 2 weeks, we're going to have 10 out of state guests. That'll and they're all coming to the temple. That will be your practice circle." So that was the bigger thing for me that was scary, but I did a great job and everyone got so much out of it, which I'm so pleased. And then you think, okay, all right, whew, I'm shown that I know this stuff. And then the night of the ritual, it's long, it's hours, it's 2 phases, the second and third, and it's the coven is there total to begin. And sometimes extra people. It can come together where visiting witches or covens may be there. I think in my case, we had previous members fly back. We had a full room, I remember. You're nervous and the whole thing is gonna get underway, and it's several hours and layers of part 2 and part 3. I had a lot of anxiety about the length of time of holding the energy really strong or clear, because I tend to kinda zap out a bit in ritual, like, I'm forgetful afterwards because it's more channeling for me, and it is getting thrown into I will liken it to crossing the abyss. You think so?
I had to do the same. I had to prove myself. I had to lead the entire ritual, decided everything, and then I had to prove that I knew. And I had to prove it to not only my teacher, but also to Morven, who was the high priestess.
Mhm.
Um, uh, the Bene still line, and it was yes, as you said, it's a little bit intimidating because you, oh my God, did I forget anything? You do surrender the same way. I did surrender the same way in the first degrees. And then the second and third, you are absolutely surrendered. I mean, and I think it's yes, it is long. And the thing for me is that they say you give at least 3 years on the first degree, at least three.
Right.
That didn't happen with me at all. I was in first degree for probably a year and a half, and then I received the second and third. And the reason why it's because they test me. They test me and they test me and they test me and they saw, well, you have a lot of experience. And I did. I had a lot of experience previously with ritual and with very traditional paths coming from Lisbon. Only sometimes that happens. It's not a rule for everyone. I mean, 3 years is the minimum, but it varies because we have to navigate the student. We don't really know if the person is like very good or if it is not good. What does it need? Need more time, this or that, and then that will vary the 3 years or even more than that. So
And
that's well.
you don't have to take your second and third. You're like,
No, you can stay as as a first for as long as you want. I know somebody that has been a first degree for 50 years almost. So
it's beautiful and lovely. You participate fully. You're there with your heart and soul for ritual and worship. And I think that's really even appealing in some ways. You don't have to take on all the teaching responsibility or organizing responsibility. You show up and you enjoy all of it and contribute your love and beauty and truth, and then you go home.
the second and third it's a choice. You will choose to take it. You ask for it. Then, as you said, there is a period of thinking about it, and then you are told. And of course, we want people there to make you a little bit more on your toes, and that's lovely because you become a host and you do that circle, and it's really lovely because you are pouring your heart and soul and knowledge and all of the skill that you acquired, and then you're showing what you know. And that's really a very important piece, I think. How did you feel the progression of power from really experiencing for the first time on the first degree, first months, and then on the end, right at the edge of second and third? What do you think that was there a difference?
Well, I made my contacts with the gods of the tradition and the inner plane teachers of the tradition stronger and stronger. Like for me, I said 5 years I was a first degree. And that was weekly meetings and a lot of work on my part. I was serious about it and really showed up and had great attendance and really put the energy in. But I needed to make the inner plane contacts solid. And so that's when the power began to really build for me. It was more through that, I feel, than the people. The people certainly had power and showed how to use it, no doubt about it. I'm gonna say it built really that way, but when I got my second and third, I was very much more in tune with the inner tradition, in the part of the tradition that resides in another dimension, the older, deeper collective of the Alexandrian witchcraft tradition. I think it has, we talked about it, kind of an egregore there that's accumulated energy, and I really was connected to that, and I think that was the power for me, how it came through.
Well, we think about initiations as first degree is an initiation into the mysteries. Then the second degree, it's the penetration into those mysteries. And then the third degree is the celebration of the previous two. And so when we're talking about second and third, it's really piercing those mysteries and going through that and then finding yourself in that. And I think that sometimes you don't really realize at the time. I mean, it's a beautiful ritual. You're meeting with your own self in a different level. For me, it was a very transformative experience. Now, I come from my background is on. I came from Portugal, of course, and my background in magic in Portugal was long. So I have been studying with this wonderful lady in Lisbon and her husband for years, and she taught me a lot of folk magic and the ancient ways of Portugal magic. And then, of course, don't forget the Inquisition in Portugal was very permanent, but they were not looking for um, witches. They were looking for Jewish people because those were the true heretics.
Against the church or perceived against the church.
So they perceived them as the true heretics. And so, of course, there were a lot of witchcraft just went through the net of the Inquisition in Portugal, which actually survived in the ways and superstitions that we still have today in Portugal. So there's a lot of things that I practiced in Portuguese magic that was really, for me, was really a training of sorts that really accelerated a little bit of my understanding of magic and how magic works in the old ways. I had, if you want, a little bit more of traditional witchcraft, not Wicca, but traditional witchcraft of Portugal on that living experience of that power. So I come from that, and it is this involvement in the currents of the Portuguese land and the magic that was done and still is done here in Portugal. So I bring that in. And of course, when I showed my skills, and we had to prove actually that we were capable of making change.
Right.
Each of us have a different way of coming into this, into the threshold of the second and third. And we do come with different experiences and different backgrounds. The power was interesting because there was a recognition of power. Because I had experienced power before. It was not my first time that I had experienced power. And when I speak about this, I'm talking about Portuguese magic power. And it is old, it is connected. It is a different way of looking at things. It is a very thick and ancient power, so of magic that runs deep in the land of Portugal. So I've had that contact. We had talks about this, Sally, because we talk about the ancient currents, and we were talking about this in Portugal when you were here, and you experienced yourself that recognition as well, which is very interesting because you, as a psychic and also as a high priestess, you actually you felt that, which I thought that it was very interesting because we all do. So those who actually are in the magic, in the and had touched the power and by experience, they recognize the old power. And that is definitely present in the Alexandrian tradition. And you do recognize it when we come from another outside of.
I loved, you saw my face when I was there. Every time I turn around, I'm like, "Oh my god, look at this energy, look at this being. See that? Have you guys noticed this? Look at over here, here's the cemetery. Look at that church. Have you seen all the" and you guys were like, "Yes, Ellie, we see it every day." But I was like, "This is" I mean, it was a power grid unbelievable. Like, the ley lines in Portugal are outstanding, and there's a I know about exactly what you're saying, this ancient bedrock of power and magical power there, but I also really feel that in Scotland, which is my heritage, the UK, strongly throughout Britain, and I've traipsed all over that country too. I was thinking about one year we went and my daughter and I made dowsing rods out of copper coat hangers at the first hotel we were in, and we took them everywhere and we were using them all over England and people were kind of making fun of us, but we were exploring the ley lines and all those sacred spots. But I was gonna ask you that actually. I worked alone magically, in nature, in power spots, and in travel, all my life. I don't even know people actually that come to witchcraft or Wicca that didn't do magic as children somehow. Collect acorns and put them on the top of a little tree that's been cut off and bring a leaf and, like, do something with a stick. And, I mean, didn't we I used to take eggshells out to my grandparents' yard and put little offerings in the eggshells, and I had a magic stick that was forked, a little tiny one. I don't know why I love that stick, but I wouldn't cast a circle or call quarters. I knew none of that, but I worked that little altar of things, and I visualized what I needed, mostly what I wanted for Christmas or my birthday, or things like that I would win over my brother or my boy cousins, that I would be the catch the biggest fish or my thing would be better, or I would find all the Easter eggs. When I work with others in the coven, it's very different. And that took me a while too. I like to do things my way and I like raising my own power. And I think I don't want to be distracted by people that I can't focus.
The good thing, and I had a moment with you that was very precious to me when you visit, and this is something that I will always cherish with me because it was a deep connection between both of us, and It was the moment that we found that tree in Lisbon. Remember?
Yeah, yeah.
And that was very real power that we found in the middle of this very busy city. Everything closed, and it was just us, nobody else. And meanwhile, there's like cars coming by and all of this. And there's this very ancient tree in the middle of the sidewalk, really. And we just work magic in that particular place at time. And this is why it's very important for people to really cherish these magical people that they know and keep them close because this is unique. The connection of magic that you have with other people, it's invaluable. It's really, really good, and you do recognize at that point, you recognize each other's essence. So it's really you're not working as Ellie and Karagan, you're working as older
Old priest.
souls, older priesthood, older, So it transcends traditions, it transcends everything, and it goes into this wonderful place of magic and manifestation.
And I do think that tree was part of we can call it the universal witchcraft current. Maybe we yes, every land has its genus loci and its plant spirits and its ancestors and its war dead. And every land has and its ley lines has these things. And so out of that, I think I've always thought generated witchcraft because it is the connection of that power to the human that makes witchcraft. That's the relationship and they're culturally different, but they're all over the world. And today we can kind of anthropology kind of think of it as the witchcraft current. But I believe that. I believe that's real. And you see it in different places. You find it in different people. Certainly you've been on travels where you sit down at the pub and lo and behold, a little old creature sitting next to you turns out to be 90 years old and they'd grown up in the little village and they know all the secret places and they say, "Well, do you want to go to the witch cave with me tomorrow morning? I'll be happy to take you there." And you're like, "Yes, I want to go to the witch cave with you tomorrow morning." And you go on this other time adventure with a person you've never met in your life and their little faces beaming because they're so excited to show it to a traveler. And that happens, doesn't it? It's synchronicity, but it's happened for me so many times. About that tree, though, we both are walking up strenuous hills because that's what we did in Lisbon. This tree called to us. We raced over to it. We both hugged it and we were like, "Oh my God." And this tree
It
was
it does look like it really if we talk about this to people, it does sound like tree hugging, but it really wasn't. It was it was a moment of magic. It really was. We did very real magic right then and there, and it wasn't really hugging only the tree, it was really and I remember there was this woman right beside it that was selling port wine in chocolate cup. No, it was cherry liquor.
yes.
She was selling cherry liquor in little chocolate shot cups, and and she was right there, and we didn't care. We just go on and did whatever we had to do.
Hopefully, your coven teachers and leaders and elders I was in a group that did have some, what we might say, elders and had been long studying witchcraft and hermetic studies before they were Alexandrian. So, like I said, really talented occult people. They had great power, a variety of ways. We had some Italian people and English and Appalachian. So we had people that really had these good connections already. We all were coming in there well tuned, I'll say. And so our orchestra was good. When we magicked, we really turned on the on button and we magicked and we got the room hot and cold and bright and dark and spinning, and when we cast that power into the thing, whatever we were doing and the final method of it, there was no doubt on the power. And then within a week, usually we'd hear back, "Hey, suddenly something shifted. You guys really helped me. This thing was really evidently working, like, faster than I would think, actually."
I think that magic is really a thing that's very subtle. Sometimes it's insidious. And you really think, "Oh, it's not working," or because you always think about the blast of He-Man's sword. One of the most important lessons that I had about power was about the flow of power, and people don't really they ignore that. They just don't study that, which is very important for you to recognize flow of power, because then you can say, okay, for this work, the flow is this. For that work, the flow is that, and you need to apply the right flow to the right place, because otherwise you will either kill it or drown it, or really flow well, because each work has their own channel, meaning river channel. And if you flow it too much, it's not going to work. If you do it too little, it's not going to run. So you have to really measure that current. And really, this is one of the most important lessons. It's the flow of power. People sometimes forget to work this, but it's really important.
Sometimes you have to cast out a golden net of silk, and that's the
That's
power.
right.
Very delicate and
Yeah.
flowing and loose, and especially with healing work, you can really do damage if you blast somebody too strong. You need to, I think, more of that golden silk thread net that you wanna lay over their body gently. Well, that's the passion of the magic. We always did that beforehand for the most part. We were told exactly what the working was, and kind of a quick discussion on what methods we thought were gonna be best suited and how to do it. I don't think we went into things willy-nilly like, "Oh, let's." I mean, we did some experimentation, but we were very careful about what the goal was because we were often working for other people that came to us, and we just wanted to be helpful or fixing or helping. And we would have to decide what was the right use of the power.
It's very interesting because power work is different in nature, by worked by priestesses or priests. And I remember this story that then came actually into a movie, but I can't, or a series. But I remember this thing, which was there was a convent of nuns somewhere in, a very secluded Eastern European convent, and they were known to do exorcisms without being, of course, known. They were not approved by the Vatican,
Okay.
exorcisms. And then, of course, we all know it has been substantially reported, the exorcisms by the Catholic Church of the priests, which are very forceful and very demanding and very violent, because that's how male priests in the Catholic Church work. Because they will cast out the demon, but they will cast out by lashing it and by doing all of these things. And it's really very interesting because the nuns had a totally different approach. They would cast it the same way, but they would cast it with love. They would embrace the person, and they would pour this enormous current of love into them. And that will make the entity really helpless. They couldn't bear it. They would get out because they wouldn't wanted that. So that when I saw this, and this was an example, it actually prompted me to look at these, and the craft and how the work is done. But it's very interesting because we're very different in the way that we work. But if we know magic and power well, we can, and the experience of each other, we can actually work this. And this is, I think, one of the differences that we have from them, for instance, that we are working always together, and that will make our magic and power working very powerful. So it's really knowing these currents, that it's the important thing.
And exciting and interesting every single time. I always think that's what drives a cultist is they can't wait to go get in that temple, whatever that is, or that cave, or that forest, or in their coven, or in their ceremonial lodge, and try something new and do it again because you just don't know. So many unusual things occur. It's going into the mystery every single time you go into ritual or go do magic. Because really, the mystery is the microcosm. It's stepping over the dimension. It's going to the crossroads. It's crossing the boundary and seeing, living, and working in another dimension. And then hopefully returning back to your regular physical dimension. Some of it is always going to be unknown. You're not going to know it until you see it and hear it and feel it. and then afterwards you can sort of make sense of it. But isn't it exciting every single time?
I was hearing you saying that, but I was thinking about what about the mistakes? I remember to do huge mistakes. And then I would ask the teachers, why didn't it work? I did everything. I used the right oil and the right herbs and the right planetary hour and the right this and the right that. And I said, what the question was, what were you thinking? Were you thinking about what was your, well, I was thinking about, the image of the, well, maybe that was not really what you should be thinking about. You should be thinking about something else. So there was always a reason, and there was a reason because you're inexperienced. You don't know. You want to do everything well, and you really gather all of your. It's all about. I think first degree. It's all about the logistics and how and the ingredients and the right words and the right space and the right place at the right time and then you remember I mean, those things, don't get me wrong, are very important. Medieval magicians knew that that was and they still do today, how important it is to do things in the right day, in the right hour, and we do too. But still, I think that there are other levels of this that are absolutely important, and sometimes they're overlooked by the inexperienced first degree.
Got your second and third. Could you stay in the same coven and keep working with predominantly first degrees, or did you have the experience that some second and third stayed together and worked together? I was going to ask you that anyway, because my case was where we had second and thirds. Well, because it was a training coven, it was my understanding it was designed to be fully training through the 3 degrees so that then you were equipped to start your own coven and teach and guide others. So that was the goal. That was the strength of the development. It wasn't a play toy. It was like we're going to get you from beginning to all the way with everything we can possibly give you as a fully trained in Alexandrian. So it was where I was working more when I finally did get my second and third, I was working more with first degrees than third. What about you? Were you in did you stay where you were, and did you keep working with first degrees?
I didn't, because what I had were thirds only. So basically, when I became second and third, I only did third degrees. And it was really good. You know why? Because I could use things that I wouldn't be using in the first degree. And that was really liberating. Oh, yes, but I stayed. This was a coven that was very fluctuating. They were the elders from the oldest line in America. So they were really kind of there so when I started my coven, the Temple of Luna Matras, it was really those folks that were there. And then, of course, we received other people. So they kind of like fluctuated into from one coven to the other, and they were just like assisting and, doing. And sometimes we would work together, just us working together without being in one coven or the other. It's just the working.
Right.
Uh, well, now is really good because it was when you're the third degree, there's nothing more interesting that actually work with other third degrees only. It's just very important. I think that's a very important thing and rarely happens. Rarely happens. Only circumstantially sometimes it happens, but I think that it's very important. This is why we have this thing about further training and sometimes circles of third degrees because I think that it's necessary. Sometimes it's a little bit overlooked. I think it's a very interesting experience, and I know that some elders in the Alexandrian tradition that are very well known did this all the time, and it's really good.
Being a second and third, it opens doors that you don't really know are there yet. It's whole other dimensional experiences because those degrees are the final understanding of the mystery through we can call it just crossing the abyss, we won't describe it more than that, and then coming out the other side and reconstituting yourself, soul retrieval kind of putting yourself back together again. It's a whole nother level of learning and understanding, so then from then on, when you do magic or do ritual or you're in a location, I just felt like I really had, a more intricate view of the space or the energy or the power or the magic. It's a change, and it also made me think that I'm really appreciate that Alex and Maxine changed it so that the second and third happen together, which is why it's such a long ritual. You go through the entire second degree. Then there's a little bit of a bridge there, and you go through the entire third degree. They're not really, they just happen one after the other. Because if you didn't do it that way, the soul would be left fragmented, which I think is not wise. As a psychic, I do not think it is wise. As an energy healer, I don't think it is wise. So I think they made a real clear experiment. If we put these together and we wait longer because the person not only needs to be ready for the second, they need to be ready for the third. That's why maybe you would spend a little bit more time as a first. Then you do those back to back, and then there's this journey. And you're right, it completes the whole circuit. You can do one and stay right there, and that is its own circuit, first degree. Beautiful, simple, elegant, powerful. Second and third is a second layer of circuitry, which is then also closed and completed, that I think is, really worthwhile to go for that because it teaches so much more and opens up so much more room for power and experience and work.
I think that the mystery continues on the second and third because second and third, you receive that, you go through the experience of that initiation, and there's more questions and there's more longing for experiences and what about this? What about that? So it never ends. The mystery continues, I think.